Today I am going to take a lecture on types, nature and dynamics of self-help groups. After I finish my lecture, you will be able to know the meaning of self-help group, learn the types of self-help groups. You will also identify the concept of self-help groups, what is the need for self-help groups. You shall be able to evaluate dynamics including features, need and importance, functions, and also analyze the characteristics of self-help groups. Let me begin with an introduction to self-help groups. Self-help groups, or as commonly known as SHGs, constitute of group having a universal objective, generally concerning the healing of psychological, emotional, bodily or behavioral matter. These groups labor on the law of shared maintenance. Adherents allocate a disability or difficulty, and meetings involve conversation and collective problem solving. There are self-help groups of innumerable types. Groups subsist of alcohol dependence, cancer and schizophrenia along with many others. A few groups are those for whom there is a familiar interest, for example, new parents. There are also groups for families of people affected with an ill health or disability. Self-help groups or SHGs are perhaps led by peers or by an expert. Turnout is intentional in the majority of cases. Meetings are planned by participants and there are generally no prescribed taxes, though there can be a little price related to snacks or accommodation for conducting the meetings. Some groups permit members to stay unidentified with just first names. In online communities, members opt usernames to safeguard their confidentiality. This secrecy led people to experience extra comfort when sharing private experiences and at the same time as sharing familiar circumstances and emotions. SHGs can be helpful in many ways. Members frequently get profit from the assistance and suggestion of their peers. An additional benefit can be enhanced sense of worth linked to being competent to aid others. A common emotion of belongingness and the skill to converse with others who can identify with and comprehend alike thoughts can to be of a precious advantage of the cluster gatherings. The majority of self-help groups possess a person in charge, either the person who incorporated the group or someone elected by the group, or it could be an expert. Now, the person in charge will arrange the gathering program and case discussions. A person in charge should be capable to make certain that the group continues on the path and that no one member dominates the talk. He also can select speakers or resources associated with the group rationale. A number of groups select co-leaders to take charge of the errands. Moving on to the types and nature of SHG. The types of self-help groups involves crisis, permanent and addiction groups. There exist groups that endeavor to transform the social order and groups that endeavor to change the way their members respond towards the social order. There are groups that endeavor to shape transformation among their members and folks who try to help members get a feel for the aim rather than the change. There are groups that aim towards expansion or self-satisfaction, for example, Recovery Inc. There are groups that aim towards societal support, for example, the Committee for the Rights of the Disabled. There are groups that effort to generate substitute on outline for existence, like for example, there is a gay rights group. There are also groups that endow with a protected shelter for people in the hunt for safety from the stresses of life or social order, like for example, addicts. And there are varied categories of groups that emerge from mutual living or life state, for example, bereavement groups. Let me move on to the nature of self-help groups. First and foremost is that there is a mutual support and self-help. Common support or peer support is a procedure through which inhabitants willingly move towards in order to aid all and tackle or deal with widespread troubles. Mutual support is communal. Disturbing or active support that is communally accessible or provided by people with comparable mental health situation, wherever there is various mutual conformity on what is obliging. Now, mutual support might comprise of numerous further mental health punters, non-profits and social groups. Such groups are additionally differentiated as both individual therapy, which is inner focused, and social reform, which is outer focused groups. The previous is where associates look for to recover themselves, whereas the second set includes encouragement by organizations in order to develop coping mechanism in order to eradicate serious mental traumatic situations. Self-help groups are subsets of communal maintenance and peer support groups and encompass a precise function for mutual aid in fulfilling a universal necessity, overcoming a communal handicap or life-disrupting mental problem. SHGs are not as much of bureaucratic and work on a more masses at grassroots level. Self-Help Association is nationwide association of restricted self-help groups or mental health consumer groups that sponsorship research maintains public relations or foyer for legislation in support of persons exaggerated. Self-help collections include family-to-family learning and hold up sustainable groups, the efficacy of which has been long established in a current prescribed study. Next, I am going on to behavior control or stress coping groups. Behavior control or stress coping groups of individual therapy groups. Here researchers distinguish between behavior control groups such as the Alcoholics Anonymous and TOPS and stress coping groups such as of mental health support groups, cancer patient support groups and groups of single parents. German researchers refer to stress coping groups as conversation circles. Considerable dissimilarities subsist among behavioral control groups plus stress coping groups. Here gatherings of behavior control groups be liable to be considerably superior than stress coping, complements by more than a factor or two. Behavior control group associates comprises a longer standard grouping possession than members of stress coping groups, 45 months as compared to 11 months. In addition to this, they are less expected to believe their connection as provisional. Whilst quite few members of both sets witness specialized concomitantly while being vigorous in their grouping, stress coping members be additionally expected to encompass beforehand seen proficients than behavior control group members. Likewise, stress coping groups work more rapidly with mental health professionals. Next is member versus professional leadership. Now, what is member leadership? Definite subsets of talk circles are classified as talking groups. In talking groups, all associates within the group contain the identical privileges. Every associate is accountable, solitary for themselves. Group associates cannot create conclusions for further group members. All groups are independent. Every person concentrates on the group, on version of their own troubles. No matter what is talked about in the group, stands top secret. In addition to it, membership is without charge. Proficiently led group psychotherapy. SHGs are not deliberately to supply deep psychotherapy. However, their stress on psychosocial procedures, in addition to appreciative communal, by folks suffering with identical or comparable mental illnesses, does accomplish positive healing goals. Interpersonal knowledge, which is completed in the course of procedures such as response plus consensus, is usually de-emphasized in self-help groups. This is principally for the reason that it can be frighteningly as well as necessitate guidance and considerate of little group procedures. Likewise, realism testing too is de-emphasized. Realism testing relies on consensual corroboration, presenting response, looking for feedback as well as conflict. These procedures hardly ever arise in self-help groups, although these habitually happen in proficiently intended groups. The actions diverge and can comprise a hub on self-help, information, peer support, campaigning and fundraising. Many groups comprise of the entire of these. Group gatherings differ. Various weekly, a few monthly, in addition to others maintain each other by telephone or internet. Now, what is the underlying theory of self-help groups? The efficiency of group maintains is supposed to obtain from a diversity of psychosocial causes described: social support, experimental understanding, social learning theory, social comparison theory, as well as helper therapy principle. Social support is the survival of optimistic psychosocial connections amid others by means of whom there is mutual trust and concern. Positive relationships put in to positive modification and barriers in opposition to stressors and adversities by donation. Emotional support, that is esteem, attachment and reassurance. Next is instrumental support, which could be material goods and services. There's companionship, and then finally there is information support, which could be advice, it could be in the form of guidance and feedback. Experimental understanding is particular information along with point of view that individual attain beginning from existing throughout a exacting understanding, such as substance violence, a substantial disability, chronic bodily or psychological infirmity, or a disturbing occasion such as a struggle, an unusual tragedy, family hostility, or a brutal offense, sexual violence or captivity. Experimental understanding is liable to be distinctive plus realistic, and while communal add to resolving troubles as well as humanizing superiority of living. Now, the social learning theory hypothesizes that peers, since they have undergone plus survived pertinent practices, are additionally realistic role models for others. Connections through peers who are effectively coping amid their practices or ill health are more probable to consequences in positive activities revolutionize. Social comparison states that individuals are more contented interacting with others who allocate a common distinguishing feature within themselves, such as psychiatric infirmity, in order to set up good judgment of normalcy. By interrelated interactions with others who are alleged to be superior to them, peers are provided with wisdom of optimism as well as something to struggle towards. The helper therapy belief suggests facilitating here are 4 considerable profits to individuals who give peer support. Number 1, enlarged wisdom of interpersonal competencies as a consequence of creating an impact happening in another individual's existence. Number 2, expansion of a sense of equal opportunity in providing as well as pleasing among himself or herself with others. Number 3, collaborative, achieve innovative, personally relevant acquaintance as serving. And fourthly, the co-worker receives community support from the individual they facilitate along with others. Now, what are the distinguishing features of self-help groups? These groups essentially have 5 distinguishing features. 1, central concern. Existence troubles, crises, problems as well as challenging circumstances are widespread to each and every member of the group. Number 2, sociable interaction in spite of client-patient relations. Number 3, shared reciprocity of serving, getting and providing support by each and every associate. Number 4, observed understanding used for coping mental health troubles. And number 5, a community narrative that comprises the wisdom and experience of its members. Next is the functions of SHGs. The important functions of SHGs are: number 1, enabling members to become self-reliant and self-dependent. Number 2, providing a forum for members for discussing their social and economic problems. Number 3, enhancing the social status of members by virtue of their being members of the group. Fourthly, providing a platform for members for exchange of idea. Fifthly, developing and encouraging the decision-making capacity of members. 6, fostering a spirit of mutual help and cooperation among members. Sixth function is instilling in members a sense of strength and confidence which they need for solving their problems. Eighthly, providing organizational strength to members. Ninth function is providing literacy and increasing general awareness among members. And finally, the 10th function is promoting numerically and equipping the poor with basic skills required for understanding monetary transactions. Now, what are the roles and effectiveness of SHGs? Social support and mutual aid. Self-help groups offer together a society as well as an intellect of belonging. The social support and mutual aid accessible in a group might be serious to improvement, psychotherapy, or strong coping. This is particularly accurate for communally inaccessible inhabitants or individuals from dysfunctional family units who possibly will incorporate modest or null disturbing support. Taking part in a community setup of peers decreases social as well as emotional remoteness, along with support strong behavior. Group members can suggest absolute support plus jointly be a depository of useful experimental understanding. Next is self-esteem and self-efficacy. Self-help groups encourage self-respect or self-confidence by hopeful give and take relationship. The idea of self-efficacy or the faith to facilitate that one is skilled is supported by strengthening suitable performance as well as attitudes and by means of sharing significant information concerning the sickness or circumstance. For instance, there might be an substitute of information on the subject of how to manage with unsuccessful or disturbed relations regarding what is sensible to anticipate as of healthcare experts, regarding how to handle as well as deal with the pain or community embarrassment, with reference to where to set off as well as to whom for a variety of requirements. Efficiency of self-help group. SHGs are efficient indeed for serving community as well as recover from broad diversity of troubles. These groups have been revealed to be as efficient as psychoanalytically oriented group therapy. Effects of 12-step procedures go further than individuals of cognitive behavioral inpatient programs. Individuals in self-help groups for mental health are interrelated with diminutions in psychiatric hospitalizations, in addition to the shorter hospitalization if they happen. Members exhibit enhanced coping skills, superior approval of their mental health problems, enhanced medication adherence, reductions in the height of worry, superior contentment with their well-being and enhanced functioning on a daily basis, plus superior illness administration. Involvement in self-help groups for mental health encourages more appropriate use of professional services, making the time spent in care more efficient. The amount of time spent in the programs and how proactive the members are in them has also been correlated with increased benefits. Decreased hospitalization and shorter durations of hospitalization indicate that self-help groups result into financial savings for the healthcare system, as hospitalization is one of the most expensive mental health services. Similarly, reduced utilization of other mental health services may translate into additional savings for the system. As self-help groups for mental health boost self-worth as well as confidence, decreases disgrace, speeds up healing plus rehabilitation, progresses decision-making executives, reduces affinity to decompensate beneath anxiety, plus recover community performance. They are not forever revealed to decrease psychiatric symptomatology. The healing positions are accredited in order to amplify community support, intellect of community, learning as well as personal empowerment. Associates of self-help grouping for mental health rate their awareness for the group's efficiency on standard 4.3 on a 5-point Likert scale. Let me summarize what I have told you so far. SHGs comprise inhabitants amid a familiar collection who willingly approach mutually in order to contribute to, arrive at, in addition to become expert from each other in a trust, sympathetic and also open surroundings. The mutual relationship is definite as the communal knowledge connected to being established as having a severe mental illness such as bipolar illness, schizophrenia or major depression. Furthermore, getting services from the mental health organizations. Self-help is foundation on the theory of serving oneself as well as others at a similar instance. Consequently, self-help is a shared development devoid of a dichotomy amid the helper as well as the individual being assisted. Association in self-help is neither authorization nor contributions. Association is a self-selection procedure. SHG developed preliminary from the underneath up to the grassroots. Decision making rests exclusively in the hands of the community. It necessitates, or mutually that is, group associates. Self-help is concerning distribution of widespread incidents and occurrences amid inhabitants with widespread frequent traumatic mental problems, and in this case, natives with severe mental illnesses. And finally, the responsibility of experts is to provide referrals in addition to slot in additional supportive and caring work outside the grouping, not to scamper the groups which would defeat the mechanism of self-efficacy.